Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So after the Rangers Game 6 elimination on Saturday, every single Metro team season has now come to an end. So now we can fully review them, fully grade them, and that's what we're going to do today. We're going to look at every single team and give them a grade based on their preseason expectations, how those expectations may be changed, what did they do in terms of roster management, any trades that they made, just overall based on what we thought coming into the season, what the goals for every single team had, how close did they come to it. And I'm going to be honest, for these Metro teams, it's not going to be that good of grades. I think a lot of Metro teams disappointed by a decent amount this year. There's going to be a couple grades, B, B+, A-. Definitely no A+, probably no A's. So let's not waste any time. Let's get into it. And up first, we got the Carolina Hurricanes. And for the Carolina Hurricanes, I'm going to go with the C. Perfectly meh for the Carolina Hurricanes when looking at it. At the end of the day, this team has had Stanley Cup or bust expectations definitely for the last two seasons, and they failed to meet it. They took a step back considering last year they made the Eastern Conference Finals. This year, go down 3-0, simply unacceptable. Now, it's not a D+, it's not a D. They still are one of the premier teams in the NHL. It's not like they scrapped to get a wild card spot. They're going to be back here next year, and at the end of the day, that can give you at least some hope. And there are some positives to extrapolate from this season. Seth Jarvis fully breaking out. He looks like a future young star, future point per game guy. They traded for Jake Guentzel. They're probably going to retain Jake Guentzel. So overall, Carolina, disappointing season, but you're not losing your mind over the season. You know, next year you're probably going to be a 105, 110 point team yet again in the mix. It feels like a wasted opportunity considering a lot of you guys are expiring. You're not going to be running back the same team, although you do have some good young talent coming up. But overall for the Carolina Hurricanes, it's definitely a disappointing season. So I think a C is fair. A C is fair. If they made the Eastern Conference Finals and lost, probably looking at like a B-. B. Stanley Cup Finals would have been a B+, A-. Then if they won it, obviously A+. But C for the Carolina Hurricanes as of right now, or just overall, considering the season's over. Next up, Columbus Blue Jackets. D+ for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Not that I expected them to make the playoffs or even be like that much in a wild card race, but we did expect them to take a positive step forward considering they went out, addressed their defense core, although I thought maybe they gave a little bit too much term to Damon Severson, gave up too much for an Ivan Provorov. We thought that they were going to be a solid 75, 80, maybe 85 point team, and that obviously did not materialize. And in part of that is the fact that Mike Babcock got fired before he even coached the game for the team, but still unacceptable. And none of their guys really flashed that much at the NHL level. At least they're young guys. Adam Fantilli had an okay rookie year. Wouldn't say he absolutely crushed expectations. Dmitry Vornikov's probably the one guy that I would say that's a positive. That's a guy that I did not expect. But David Jiricek, Kent Johnson, really up and down seasons, mainly because Pascal Vinsky just doesn't really give them the opportunities. But overall, for the Columbus Blue Jackets, I don't know what the hell the next general manager, or that we know what the next general manager is, Don Waddell. I don't know if he's going to say we have another 2 to 3 years of kind of rebuilding and being bad, or if they're going to try to yet again make some win-now moves. But Columbus, there's not a ton of hope outside of Adam Fantilli and the guy that they selected 4th overall. They're in a very weird situation. Not a horrible future. Again, they do have a lot of young talent, but this season was a pretty big failure, so I think a D+ for them is pretty fair. Pittsburgh Penguins. D-, man. D- for the Pittsburgh Penguins. I can't go full F because they were in the playoff race towards the end. But when looking at them this summer, trade for Erik Karlsson, and basically with this, I'm not looking at like what they did in draft and free agency that much. It's basically you got to factor in considering after they traded for Erik Karlsson that the expectations shot through the roof, but it's mainly based on the season. So in looking at them, they had playoff expectations. I wouldn't say they were cup or bust, but it was definitely to get back into the playoffs. I'd say probably win a round. So the fact that they had this horrendous, unacceptable start, were floating around 500, waved the white flag, traded Jake Guentzel, and although they did make a late push, I'm not sure that there's a ton of optimism that comes with that late push, considering most of their players are getting up there in age. We saw Evgeny Malkin take a step back this year. Chris Letang is no longer a legit number one defenseman. I think we can agree on that. So when Rickard Rakell's contract is looking horrendous, so it's not looking good in the Steel City of Pittsburgh. So when looking at them, I got to give them a D+. My New York Islanders, I'm going to go with a C as well, like the Carolina Hurricanes. Perfectly meh seasons. There's definitely some positives to take away. Noah Dobson breaks out, goes from around 50-point guy to getting to the 70-point mark. Bo Horvat, I was a little bit questionable on that extension of $8.5 million, considering he wasn't that good when he got traded to the Islanders and was pretty bad in the playoffs. He's proven that he's a solid 70-point two-way low-end number one center. I'm not going to act like he's a legit top 15 center, but that's looked good. Brock Nelson is still fantastic. But Ilya Sorokin, on the other hand, a year before his massive extension at $8.25 million kicks in, he plays like shit for the most part, especially come playoff time when he plays for one period and allows 2 or 3 goals. It was abysmal. So there's positives, there's negatives. They lost and they made the playoffs, which was their objective. They were only expected to be a playoff team, but to lose in 5 to the Carolina Hurricanes is just so underwhelming. I didn't expect them to beat Carolina, but they put up a fight, but they choked it away multiple times. So when looking at the New York Islanders, I think you got to go with the C. I can't go C minus D plus because they did make the playoffs, but it's very disappointing. And at this point, it feels like we're just going to repeat the same season for the next 2 to 3 years, unless Ilya Sorokin steps up. The one positive is, though, if Ilya Sorokin plays like a Vezina guy, we should be a playoff team pretty safely next year. But this year was definitely disappointing in a lot of aspects. And next up, Washington Capitals. I'm going to go with an A-, even though they were a first-round exit and got swept. They didn't even win a game in the first round. I think they had wildly different expectations than, say, Carolina or New York Islanders. Their expectations were to be competitive, play some of their young guys, start transitioning to more of a young team, and maybe make the playoffs. And they did make the playoffs. They found a way. They scrapped together, and they traded at the deadline. They got off half of Kuznetsov's deal, got a 3rd-round pick in exchange. Anthony Mantha traded him. That looked like an untradeable contract coming into the season. They got a 2nd and a 4th-round pick. So the fact that they were able to retool and actually have a pretty fun, pretty competitive season. They're still picking at 17th overall, which I wasn't expecting to be bottom 10 bad. So they still have a decently high pick, and they got some assets for some of their key pieces, on top of the fact that Connor McMichael, Alexei Protas got some real run this season. I think it's a pretty encouraging season for the Washington Capitals. They're not going to be making Eastern Conference Finals, Stanley Cup Finals the next 3 to 4 years, but we know that because they had a fantastic 15-year run with Ovechkin. The goal the next 2 to 3 years is stay competitive with Ovechkin, but bring up the young guys, and they, for the most part, succeeded at that this season. Next up, the Philadelphia Flyers. Man, this is probably the toughest grade to give out because when looking at Philadelphia, they smashed expectations in terms of the regular season. They were expected to be a 65 to 70 point team. They ended up at the 87 point mark. They almost made the playoffs, but it is kind of disappointing considering they were safely in a playoff spot, then falled out. And also they're rebuilding, so the fact that they're only picking at 12th overall now is kind of disappointing. At the end of the day, I'm still going to go with a B+ because a lot of their younger-ish guys, Owen Tippett, Travis Konechny's still pretty young, a guy like Cam York, Joel Farabee, all showed signs that they can be competitive guys. Once Matvei Michkov comes over next season, and if they can get another pretty solid prospect at 12th overall this season, they do have a bright future, and they sold at the deadline. That was another good thing. So Philadelphia, although maybe in the long run, them sucking this year would have been the best thing if they ended up getting a higher draft pick. I think when looking at them, they did far exceed expectations in terms of the on-ice product. They're building a solid culture in Philadelphia. I think you could argue that even though they missed the playoffs, building that culture of winning compared to just sucking it up 65, 70 points is important, even though they did collapse at the end. I think if you're a Philadelphia Flyers fan, you need to be pretty optimistic. Losing Cutter Gauthier just absolutely sucks, but I can't really blame them for that. I got to blame more so Cutter Gauthier, for he was never going to play there. From what it seemed like, once they changed general managers, he was non-responsive. So I can't really hold that against them, and they still got a 2nd-round pick that could be decently high next year in Jamie Drysdale. Philadelphia Flyers, I'd say a success of a season. I'm going to go with the B+. Not a success of the season, though, is the New Jersey Devils. I'm going to go with the D-, similarly to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Out of the world expectations. They had full Stanley Cup expectations. Most people had them as a top 3 team, definitely top 5 in the entire NHL. They were a trendy Stanley Cup pick. And they missed the playoffs, and they weren't even close. The Philadelphia Flyers were in the race down the stretch, and the New Jersey Devils weren't. They traded for Tyler Toffoli in the offseason, which we don't have to talk about that much, but then they ended up dealing him at the deadline for only a 2nd and 3rd-round pick, and just when looking at it, everything went wrong. Jack Hughes gets hurt, Dougie Hamilton gets hurt, goaltending doesn't show up. The only reason I would say it's not an F is the fact that Simon Nemec looked fantastic when he was playing. Not a ton of points, but he was fantastic both ways of the ice. Luke Hughes, solid rookie year. What do you have? 47 points, although points aren't the end-all be-all. The fact that he did that at 21 years old, extremely impressive. So there are some takeaways. I think Alexander Holtz had a pretty solid season, even though Lindy Ruff hates him for some reason. Timo Meier at the back half of the year was well worth his contract. There are some positives, although some people might be calling for an F. I can't quite say that. I think New Jersey Devils are going to be solid going forward as long as they can get competent goaltending. But this year, massive failure. Got to go with a D-. And then lastly, the New York Rangers. I'm going to go with a B. I'm gonna go with the B. This you might call me crazy for that, considering they did lose in the Eastern Conference Finals, but I still think there are a lot of positive takeaways. First off, regular season won the President's Trophy. That is an impressive feat to accomplish. I know at the end of the day, Stanley Cup or bust for New York Rangers, but also Alexi Lafreniere breaking out. That was fantastic for them. 28 goals, 29 assists. Artemi Panarin had a bounce back year in the regular season, at least. I know he shat the bed, but last year he only had 92 points in 82 games and completely shat the bed in the playoffs, so it was a positive year for him. Vincent Trocheck's deal is looking fantastic. Another great season for him. His first year on the deal was like 60 points. This year he was a point per game player. So when looking at the New York Rangers, I still think there are solids. Keandre Miller looks like a future top 4 defenseman. Braden Schneider was impressive in his first full year for the New York Rangers. I can't say that this was a massive failure. Playoff-wise, it was a failure, but I still think there are some positive takeaways for the New York Rangers, and they were one of the only 4 teams. They were one of the 4 last teams in the NHL, so I'm going to give them a B, maybe a B minus. B minus or B. B minus or B. They're definitely not in the C's, in my opinion. So we're recapping: Canes, C; Jackets, D+; Penguins, D-; Islanders, C; Capitals, A-; Flyers, B+; Devils, D+; Rangers, B-; B. I'll go with the B-, actually. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about these grades? I'm probably going to do the Central Division next, considering all 8 are eliminated. I might just do the other divisions as well, just the 7 teams. And the Oilers and Panthers are either an A if they lose in the Cup final, or like an A+ if they win in the Cup final. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about this? I'll be seeing you in the next one.